I haven't taken a math class since my freshman year of college. It was statistics, and I only needed 4 credits to my degree. However, there is one principle of math that's caught my eye in recent years, and as a theater and film scholar, I think I'm the only person qualified to give y'all a lesson about Terryology. Summer vacation may be over, but the fun's just begun. For the last decade now, Terrence Howard has been formulating his own logic language that he calls Terryology. But before we can dive into Einstein's theory of stupidity, we must first understand the origins of how it came to fruition. In 2008, Terrence Howard was cast for the role of Rhodey in Iron Man, which would set him up to play War Machine down the line in the MCU. However, due to financial problems with keeping him employed, he was replaced with Don Cheadle, who would portray the character in all future projects. He was nominated for several Academy Awards in the years prior, and even won a Screen Actors Guild Award in 2006. He made 9 times what Robert Downey Jr. was paid for as the lead in Iron Man, just as a supporting character. Because of this, it was very expensive to keep him employed at the time, as Marvel was still going through financial bankruptcy in 2008. It's pretty ironic how their status flipped because of the MCU. Robert Downey Jr. is probably one of the most recognizable actors in modern cinema. Meanwhile, if you ask people about Terrence Howard, you'll be lucky they even knew he was in the MCU. He ended up making less money than RDJ in the long run, and he was so unhappy about this, he went on a whole journey of self-discovery in Uganda, where he created his own logic language, Terryology. That's his whole origin story. And full disclosure, this man is not a genius. He's just a washed-up celebrity who uses words people don't understand while trying to sell his logic language. This, paired with his natural charisma from years of acting, Terrence Howard is able to brainwash the average person into believing he's some kind of enlightened genius. So, now that y'all know a little bit more about the man behind the product, let's delve into some of the fundamentals of Terryology. Let's start with the biggest law that Terrence Howard himself has built his entire identity around. 1 times 1 equals 2. That's his go-to whenever he talks about Terryology. So, if we followed this single formula in itself, cars, planes, phones, medicine, literally everything we use in our day-to-day lives that is keeping us alive right now would cease to exist. Because his logic language is fundamentally wrong. He even made his own video explaining how 1 times 1 equals 2, and admittedly, if you set aside everything that he's wrong about in this video, he's still f***ing wrong. He doesn't even come close to accidentally making a breakthrough in this 12-minute yap session that's supposed to explain how 1 times 1 equals 2. To really put this into perspective, I'm just going to play a quick snippet from his video.
If the square root of 2 satisfies x squared equals x times x, which equals 2, then our arithmetic conventions allows us to simply write it as 2 to the 1/2. Now in this way, 2 to the 1/2 squared is equal to 2 to the 1/2 times 2, which is equal to 2 to 2 over 2, which is also equal to 2 to the 1, which also equals 2.
Such profound words from a less than profound man. Now it's important to note, I'm not a mathematician. That's something Terrence Howard and I have in common. But you don't need to be some kind of galaxy brain individual to understand such a basic equation. A 5-year-old could explain it. In fact, I'm going to explain why 1 times 1 doesn't equal 2, and I'm going to get real physical and use a visual aid, so no matter how stupid you are, you'll understand why 1 times 1 can never equal 2 in any scenario. Let's say you run into me at your local Beef O'Brady's and you notice that I'm holding a single bottle of adult beverage in my hand. I would say, yes, I have 1 bottle of adult beverage in my hand. I have 1 bottle in 1 hand. If I pick that up, I would have 1 adult beverage. 1 times 1 equals 1. There's not any scenario where this drink's suddenly gonna pop a Shadow Clone Jutsu and I'll end up with 2 somehow. I have 1 hand that's holding 1 bottle of adult beverage. 1 times 1 equals 1. That's just how it works. It's not up for interpretation. Math is not something that can be half-assed and still be right. It's a series of fundamental rules that have a correct formula that make up a component of how our world works. Without this knowledge, you wouldn't be watching this video. You'd probably still be out in the world hunting and gathering supplies like it's a game of Minecraft and probably dying in the process. However, in Terrence Howard's mind, 1 times 1 equals 2. Thus, in his world, he was in 1 Iron Man film, which means he was actually in 2 Iron Man films. Even though, without the concept of 1 times 1 equals 1, there wouldn't even be 1 Iron Man movie for him to have been in. The laws of Terryology aren't compatible either. His own logic language can be disproven through the principles of his own logic language. As evident by Terrence Howard's second law of Terryology, the value of 2 actually equals 3. Immediately, this would collapse the entire numeric system. The concept of counting would fundamentally alter beyond just 2. The successor of 1 would be 3, and the successor of 3 would be 4, despite 2 and 3 having the same value. The stock market would crash. Every currency would be devalued, and his own fundamental belief that 1 times 1 equals 2 would be wrong. I mean, it is wrong, but it certainly wouldn't be right if the value of 2 equals 3. If 2 equals 3, according to the law of Terryology, then 1 times 1 equals 2 would actually equal 3. Thus, the amount of Iron Man films Terrence Howard was in was actually 3. If you still haven't picked up what I'm laying down, let's take a look at the third law of Terryology. That being, 0 doesn't exist. So here's an excerpt from the book of Terryology that explains the concept of 0. And according to the fundamental law, to quote, there was no such thing as 0. He explains this by stating, if I have an apple, and you gave me your apple, how many apples do I have? 2? Wrong. You don't understand. No, you don't understand, he says, and then explains, as long as you're still in this universe, whatever you have, I have, because everything in this universe is connected to everything else. Even if you take my apple and place it into an adjacent universe, I would still have 2 apples, because as long as the universe is touching this universe, then everything in that universe is still connected to and influenced by every single atom in this universe. And I just had an aneurysm from reading this. I'm not even joking when I say everything about Terryology seems to be some sort of coping mechanism to justify his contributions to Iron Man, and by that extension, the MCU. His logic behind why 0 doesn't exist is probably just his own failsafe and means of ensuring he was never not in the MCU. He shared a film with Robert Downey Jr. Therefore, what's his is also Terrence Howard's. Thus, he was in at least 9 MCU films, which of course is indefinite thanks to the ever-expanding multiverse. I'm not here to get philosophical. I understand there's a whole debate about the existence of 0, but again, I'm not a mathematician. I'm just here to break down what should be cut and dry, and no matter how you reach that conclusion, the answer should always be consistent according to the laws of mathematics, which Terrence Howard's Terryology contradicts. There's nothing wrong with challenging something outside the mainstream belief system. That's how innovation works, always challenging the norm. But this is the exact opposite. He's not challenging anything, he's just making shit up, and people are accepting it despite having no merit. It also doesn't help that Terrence Howard uses this math in pretty nefarious ways. For example, he tried to scam all of Uganda by promising them these new flight machines that were made using Terryology's geometry of hydrogen.
As a child, I studied chemical engineering at Pratt Institute, was there for 2 years until I saw that there was an inconsistency with the math there. And so I went out to explore a new way of understanding how the universe works, and I was able to define the grand unified field equation they've been looking for and put it into geometry.
Reminder, there is nothing more consistent than 1 times 1 equals 1. I have one hand that's holding one bottle of adult beverage. 1 times 1 equals 1. One hand is holding one bottle. I have one beverage in total.
And what I'm saying is now we have invented a new form of flight that I would like to bring here to Uganda to replace the drones to replace the helicopters, to replace the planes. We have all the funding necessary. What we need is just a fertile ground in which to build this. Now, this is the geometry of hydrogen. Of hydrogen.
Hydrogen.
This is the proton itself. So any bond that hydrogen can make, our linchpins are able to make.
That was 3 years ago, and you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But somehow, those new flight machines Terrence Howard promised didn't f***ing work. Maybe it's just a project that takes a long time. Maybe he's teamed up with S.H.I.E.L.D. in order to deliver on his promised hydrogen, geometry, proton, new flight machines that reinvent flying as we know it for the people of Uganda. Or maybe no such thing could ever exist. Not using Terryology, at least. But maybe that's just a comment from someone who's had one adult beverage. To be fair though, let's take a peek at both sides. As aforementioned, Terrence Howard did publish something trying to prove that the world of math and science is wrong. I'm not going to read all of this. Feel free to pause the video if you like, and hopefully you'll come to the obvious conclusion that he is still incorrect. He's using all of these incredible leaps in logic in order to get the conclusion he wants. What I want to highlight though is in his own paper, there's an entire section dedicated to the Anunnaki Sky People. Some call them the Anunnaki, the Sky People, whomever they were that gave us that naive generation some 6,000 years ago a multiplication table and a flat view of universal geometry. They gave that poor misguided people a false axiom upon which to build their world. In a paper that's supposed to be all about logic and math, where the f*** did the Anunnaki Sky People come in like a jump scare? That should immediately trigger a warning, sirens blaring, that this man is unhinged. It showcases that he doesn't even understand where math comes from. Math is not an invention. It's a discovery. It's something we learned, not created based upon a gift from the Anunnaki Sky People. I also can't help but call attention to how he just slides this in without any evidence or citations. It's the epitome of the meme, "Trust me, bro," and people just run with it. Why are we ignoring things like this? That's clearly a red flag in the logic and person behind the logic. Oh yeah, that was weird, talking about the Anunnaki Sky People. But he was totally right about gravity not being real. That's another fundamental of Terryology, that gravity doesn't exist. It's so stupid how people will believe in the most absurd things just so they can contradict the norm. I'm not even mad at Terrence Howard, I want to make that clear. I'm mad at people who continue to believe everything he's pulling out his ass. There's no way you would ever logically reach these conclusions. You only get there by just accepting things without questioning what's being said. That's not a sign of intelligence, that's the exact opposite. It's not a crime to be stupid, but it is a concern. And unfortunately, we've reached this day and age where people are just accepting the most outlandish things because they want to feel special. I don't like math as much as the next guy, but I'm not trying to change it because I don't understand it, and Terryology happens to be more exciting. If you ever try to employ what he's preaching about in the real world, it would fail exponentially. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because I think it serves as a good learning lesson. Just don't do anything Terrence Howard did. If life starts to go tits up, don't try to change the world. Better yourself so the world makes sense. That's really about it. So,